Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, my name is Yanis Antonio, and I head the data and analytics practice at Lab 49. Thank you for joining this webinar. Today, we want to talk about responsible AI, both in general and as it pertains to financial services. To help us understand the definitions, the ramifications, the policy implications, and also advise us on some practical ways on how to implement AI through the responsible AI framework. I have three very distinguished panelists here with me, and I'm going to go in alphabetical order. So, and I would like them to introduce themselves. Dennis, can we start with you, please?
Sure. So, hi everyone. My name is Denis Batilov, and in my current role of worldwide tech leader for AI/ML at Amazon Web Services, I lead the so-called technical field community. These are all the customer-facing technical roles in AI/ML. They help customers adopt AWS services in this space. And I'm also leading the field on responsible AI, I guess, hence I'm here. So I'm excited to talk about the subject. It's very near and dear to my heart. I've been with the company for 19 years and have a PhD in machine learning.
Fantastic, Dennis. Thank you very much. Lambert, would you mind doing the same for yourself, please?
Sure, yeah. Lambert Hogenhout. I oversee data and AI at the United Nations Secretariat in New York here. And obviously, we want to make sure we do the right thing with AI. So responsible AI is a big part of my job. I oversee both the policy side and also the implementation of AI for the purpose of our UN operations.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lambert. And Tirath?
Yeah, hi all. I'm the chief scientist at QXQ.ai. I've been involved with policy at governmental level in terms of responsible and ethical AI. I've got a number of companies that are working in providing AI assurance as a service. Yeah, I have a background really in AI and data. My main thrust is in all the problems around data contextualization, data curation, that sort of thing. And I think the fundamental problems in ethical AI are really going to evolve around data ontologies, data taxonomies, and data homology, and that sort of issue. So that's really my main interest.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tirath. And as for myself, I'm Yanis Antonio. I've been with Lab for the last 3 months or thereabouts. My background has been financial services industry in data and machine learning. And I'm here at Lab building up our data and AI practice. And as in financial services, we are a financial services consultancy based in New York City. Our clients are only capital markets and financial services. We have a long string of projects and a long string of activities in product development, in strategy, technology in general, and data and AI. And responsible AI is also very near and very dear to my heart as well. So I think we have a fantastic panel here. So without further ado, let's get into this. I would like to start by asking our panel to help us a little bit define what responsible or ethical AI means and talk a little bit about perhaps the difference between the terminologies we're hearing about. Tirath, would you like to give us your view first?
Yeah, I think it's an issue that many people have been thinking about quite a lot. And I think the thing I always hark back to is that doing the right thing is very different from doing the thing right. And most of what we are trying to do is to try to do the thing right. You know, I worry about the possible consequences of AI on job displacement, on geopolitical issues, and so on. The distinction and chasm between ethical and responsible AI is, of course, huge. And yet there's very little focus in what impact it's going to have on people's jobs and so on. So there is that sort of angle. And what we do is we fold everything to do with responsible and ethical AI into compliance and regulatory frameworks and legislative requirements and so on. large language models, generative AI, agent-based models, the integration of fuzzy and multi-sensory data and irrational data represents the frontier of AI capabilities, offering unparalleled opportunities for innovation and problem solving. At the same time, I think that the possibilities of data are increasing markedly. And the possibility of extracting alpha using concepts from system science, mathematical transformations in multiple dimension data, elastic graphs, and transfer and reinforcement learning, of course, are huge. As a postmodernist of sorts, I have a real problem with the value judgments that we're embedding in legislative and regulatory standards. I'm one of those people that believes that one cannot trust governments, one cannot trust big tech to make the right decisions. And that leaves me in a very uncomfortable place, which is if we can't trust big tech and if we can't trust governments, who are we going to trust? Which is why I'm working with a number of if you like, public interest companies to try to bring these advances to companies that apply them rather than sort of saying it's, the frameworks are provided by big tech. So I think there are those sort of aspects. And then finally, I think the issue of geopolitical competition is, I think, going to have huge impact on whatever regulatory frameworks and legislative frameworks we end up adopting, because there are enough players that will break the rules, and it's a matter of when push comes to the shove, there is very little distinction between the good and the bad, and that bothers me because if there are real advantages, economic and political advantages to be had, are we going to shackle ourselves with at a company level, are we going to shackle ourselves with regulations that are going to hold us back? So for me, that, if you like, is the paradigm, the framework that I tend to think in. And of course, there are enough standards, the European regulation, the the mooted, if you like, things in America, what we are saying in Great Britain, they're markedly different, vertical as opposed to horizontal. But I think meeting the standards is not all that difficult. But that's as much as I'll say for now, and I'll wait the rest of the panelists to make their contributions.
Thank you, Gerard. I appreciate it. I wanna hold that thought of for something you said at the very beginning that struck me, which is doing the right thing versus doing things right. I would like to hear Dennis's viewpoints on this, both on the original question as to this particular point as well.
Yeah, if we talk about responsible AI broadly, you hear it referred to as AI safety, trustworthy AI, ethical AI was mentioned, but it seems like responsible AI is one of the preferred terms, and part of the reason is it feels sort of actionable, practical, and it's really loosely about a set of best practices and tools that allow you to design, build, and deploy AI systems in a real manner. And so doing AI responsibly usually requires us to consider many distinct yet interconnected concerns. So we often call them dimensions or pillars. And these usually include fairness, explainability, transparency, privacy and security, safety, robustness. Veracity is lately very important with generative AI, which is about factual correctness, right? Dealing with hallucinations or making sure that they are reduced to the maximum degree. Controllability, government, and I think alignment is a big one too. And I think Jareth alluded to it, is doing the right thing. Are we doing the right thing? Are we building the right system? And then, of course, once you determine that that's the case, are you doing it in the right way? And, there is maybe a related question of why do we need responsible AI? Frankly speaking, if you look at all the IT systems out there, they're all, decision support systems in one form or another, most likely. And so you could, looking at this decomposition of responsible AI into the specific concerns, you could also say, well, my, smart bathroom scale, which is smart in name only usually, is telling you, for example, besides the weight, what body fat percentage you may have, and so on. And so if you actually dig a little deeper into this, you realize, well, it's actually using an estimated formula for this based on some current that goes through your body. And so, of course, there are also safety considerations here, naturally, as you can imagine. But this estimation formula, how did people arrive at that? What studies inform that formula, right? Did that study various body types and populations, right? And is it accurate? And is there a bias and fairness included in this, right? What is the transparency of how this is computed? So I think it's a problem that's beyond AI systems generally, but we focus on AI ML specifically for a good reason. These systems become more and more complex over time. They're effectively uninterpretable at this point, right? With many billions of parameters and trying to figure out what's going on inside. So there is a potential for these systems to scale the injustices at a large degree, pose other risks in safety, privacy, and security. And so that's the reason we focus on this with AI.
Fantastic, Dennis. Thank you very much. I would like to ask Lambert on his opinion, and also let's hold on the why we need responsible AI, because that's its whole topic, and I want to discuss this in a little more detail and focus on the financial services as well. I'd like to hear, Lambert, your thoughts on what we talked about, your definition of responsible AI, and how the UN and your role in the UN helps with this kind of policy framework, technology implementation, etc.
Sure, yeah. I think it's clear to all of us that in the coming 5 or 10 years, AI is going to have a huge impact on our society. It's going to be pervasive in our lives, probably. So making sure that we do it in the right way, that we don't get all kinds of negative side effects, seems very important. And yet the term responsible AI or trustworthy AI or ethical AI, the various terms that are being used, we don't have a clear worldwide definition of it. It is, I can tell you my definition, but I think it is troubling that we talk about these terms rather vaguely. I wish it would be more clearly defined. So I'll give you my definition. Responsible AI is AI that is aligned with the values and laws of the company, the community, the society in which it operates. Now, it's a nice, concise phrase, but there's lots of different problems with it. For example, when you say aligned with our values, does it mean an AI that doesn't do things that would not be acceptable if a human did it? Or does the AI need to go beyond that and do the right thing always, which humans don't do, right? We talked about bias already. Humans have bias. And should AI eliminate that and make society better? We talked about the values and laws can be interpreted in very different ways. And going back to what Virat said about doing the right thing, that's very nice. But what does the right thing mean? Then you have to start defining what is right and what is wrong. And I work for the UN. We represent 193 countries around the world. And what is right and what is wrong is not exactly the same for every community and every country. There's lots of cultural aspects that come into play. I think over time, our values also change. And I wonder how AI and the use of technology in general is affecting the values and the expectations we have. So that will also change our definition of what we think is responsible. So I think it's very hard to come up with a clear definition, even though we all sort of know what are the things we want to avoid, and what are the things that are probably helpful. But it's to get a clear, exact definition is very difficult, I think.
Thank you, Lambert. That's very wise. Actually, I wanted to deep dive a little bit into what you said about you representing 190 plus countries, and we heard from both Tirath and Dennis. You know that we have different viewpoints, not necessarily whether something can be done completely mechanistically versus what kind of policy frameworks you need to do, etc. Tirath also mentioned the European Union regulations. There's also in the United States, we have the Executive Act by the current president around AI. The White House just 5 days ago announced for the progress around responsible AI. So this whole topic is very, very hot, and it's very, just as everything as important, people will disappear. This is why we have policy and we have politics. So Lambert, I would love to hear from you, since you're representing, so you have to kind of synthesize so many different viewpoints from so many people who don't necessarily all agree with bias and discrimination, etc. Can you take that and see how that can apply into the financial service? Like when we're talking about responsible AI in financial services, we have this great discussion here. How does that high-level view we have now apply at the individual company level? And how do we synthesize the different viewpoints so the financial service companies can get a more clear view on how to proceed going forward?
Yeah, no, I think that is a question I get very often from companies that, okay, all this high level stuff is good, but what does it mean for us, and what should we be doing, and why, and how should we be doing it? And I think it is important for individual companies in the financial sectors to look at responsible AI. First of all, because there's going to be increased regulation. You mentioned a few executive orders and acts already. There's going to be more and more of those, I can guarantee you, in the coming years. And I think you need to be proactive in making sure that you have your ducks in a row, and that you know what you're doing with AI to be prepared for such regulation. I'll use a quote from a Canadian philosopher. He's not really a philosopher, he's an ice hockey player, Wayne Gretzky, and they asked him once after a game, why are you so good? Why do you make so many goals? And he said, because I don't skate to where the puck is, I skate to where the puck is going to be. And I think that's the mindset you need to have when you start creating your AI strategy and thinking about responsible AI. Don't think about the situation now. Think what it's going to be 5 years from now. And that involves a lot more regulation. The other thing that I will mention, if you think 5 years from now, there's going to be a cultural shift that we already see, where people are increasingly concerned about their personal data, and they're going to be increasingly concerned about how they're being subjected to AI. What kind of decisions that affect them are being taken by AI, and how? And as a company, the most important thing for most companies is to maintain the trust with their customers, their partners, and the general public. If you lose the trust, then you're in bad shape as a company. So from that perspective, keep that cultural shift in mind. And the number one reason to do responsible AI, I think, is that the expectation is going to be there from your customers to be responsible in the way you use AI. If not, you're not going to survive as a company.
Fair enough. Thank you, Lambert. I'd like to ask Tirath to comment a little bit on this, and I also would like to hear the panel's opinion on whether we think that responsible AI is important because of having to conform to regulations that are going to be coming in the future, or is it going to be driven more from the customer side? Basically, are we trying to say to companies, this is a regulatory issue, or is it more of a do what's right for the customer and you will be rewarded? Or is it a combination of both? Tirath, can we start with you on this? You are on, yes.
Yeah, let me come back briefly to Lambert's point about the definition. And I think fundamentally the aspect about responsible AI is predicated around transparency and accountability. Yeah, we can talk about the arbitrary nature of human values and how they evolve and so on, but that doesn't really get us anywhere. I think the fact that everything has to be human centric is really open for debate. Is not really open for debate. We know how flawed humans are, and yet we forget them because we know the old kit's going to die and somebody else will replace them and so on. So, that aspect about the human aspect comes in. But in terms of the reason to do responsible AI, they're vast. Firstly, there's the reputational damage. You do the wrong thing, people are going to stop trusting you. You may be barred from going for certain contracts and certain, patronages and so on. So there is that aspect. Then, of course, there are huge penalties that certainly in the European Union, any company that operates in the European Union will face if they break these regulations. And well, one of the points I think that really does come out, and Lambert made that point, is that about the about going where the puck is rather than where the puck was. So we know some of these things are going to change as we begin to understand, or if you like, understand the entropy that's still there in the data, and you can extract alpha and so on. So those aspects are really going to have an impact on the future of these legislative frameworks. And I think just seeing where it is going to go, because we understand data better, because our data ops are better, because of Web3 and so on. So yeah, I think that's inevitable. So we have to be cognizant that these legislations are not perfect, and we have to keep on adapting. So that's really my take on it. In terms of, if you like, the if you like, explainability of algorithms and so on, that is relatively simple in my view. I don't think that's overly complicated. The real complicated things are really around data.
Thank you, Tirath. Dennis, I would love your opinion on this.
Yeah, so let me collect my thoughts here, because a lot of the different subjects have been mentioned here. With the history of responsible AI and the question around regulations versus the interest of companies and the demand from customers on this front, I think every time we see a step change increase in capabilities of these systems, we have a set of questions that people are asking. And so I think it's the demand is both from the customer's side, from the company's side, and of course evolving regulatory landscape. We can always talk about very specific things here by industry. So in financial services, for example, if you build a system that offers some investment advice, I think you better have some sort of explainability around why that product was recommended, right? So that there's no steering towards specific products for some, wrong reasons, let's just say. And likewise, like if you're advertising a financial product like a credit card, you really need to look at who you're advertising this to, and make sure that you take sort of fairness and you study bias of this in terms of the demographics who receive these offers. So there are some specific industry and domain and vertical regulations that have historically emerged, and responsible AI, like I've personally started to realize that we need to really look ahead. I would say 5 years ago, and I started looking at it. Back then, with traditional machine learning, the things that came up the most was, bias and fairness and explainability as the kind of top considerations, because at that time, the systems and the models were narrow in terms of their applicable scope. And of course, with generative AI, now you have foundation models that could be used for a broad range of use cases. And as a result, a whole slew of new concerns and risks have emerged, some of which we already mentioned, with hallucinations, toxic content, stereotype content, and so we could look at all of these details. And so naturally, we need to catch up with tooling, and we could talk about tooling, of course, as well.
Thanks, Dennis. So yeah, it's you bring very interesting viewpoints in here, and I really like how you separated the classical machine learning from the generative AI, which I think if it was just about classical ML, I don't think any of us would be here because it was not the cool thing, and now Gen AI, everybody, it affects the whole of society versus what it did before, at least in a more visible manner. So my question here is let's start with you, and then we can work through the panel as well. Is okay. I think we have established why we need responsible AI in financial services. We have talked about policy, etc. But how do we translate this on a practical level, both from the governance side of things, but also from the technical implementation side of things? Both of these needs, I believe, need to come together to create a responsible AI way of working within financial services. You cannot have without the other. So I guess we can start on the technology side, Dennis, and then we can talk about the governance side.
Yeah, sounds good. So let's look at, for example, bias, which is one of my favorite subjects. I looked into it quite a bit in terms of traditional machine learning, and it's interesting because there is a kind of a loop back to the traditional machine learning side of things on that front. So first of all, bias and fairness as a subject, what is this really about? It's usually, if you think about it, about distribution of some resources, and you want to make sure that these resources are distributed in some equitable and equal scheme towards the various demographic groups that may be involved. So that's one way to look at it. And from traditional machine learning point of view, this is effectively a solved problem, detecting bias. There's tools and techniques, and so for us, we had SageMaker Clarify Python library that's effectively available for free online, and there's a white paper describing the actual formulas for different bias metrics. But it's not about technology anymore because there are multiple fairness criteria that exist. And for any specific application, you actually need to pick what is the right fairness criteria that I'm pursuing. And if you pursue that one, you may actually be unfair according to the other criterion there. So you need to make that choice. Then you need to study for fairness for specific groups, like is it race, is it gender, is it age or age bands, is it something else? And there's some interesting phenomena. I can speak for hours on the subject. I have what I call a list of inconvenient truths about bias detection. But and at the end of the day, there's group bias versus individual bias, and at the end, all the laws are usually formulated in terms of individual bias. So tying it back to kind of the generative era, right? A lot of attention has been spent on things like toxic language in the output, right? We don't want these chatbots to offend us in some ways. There's also been clearly work on stereotyping. And some of these assessments, especially on stereotyping, you cannot make on an individual output or utterance of a model. You need to use benchmarking and testing tools. And so with the same SageMaker Clarify and Bedrock evaluations, we have benchmarking tools that are available where you pick a specific application, a specific use case. Is it a general purpose text generation? Is it summarization? Is it chat? And then different metrics are offered for you and standard data sets that you can use to run through the benchmarks and produce the scores. But more importantly, don't rely on the standard leaderboards that are out there. Pick your own data set or evaluation data set for your use case, right? And make a determination based on that, right? And that lets you pick the right model that satisfies this. But then we also talk about guardrails that are done at real time, right? And so, for example, Bedrock Guardrails, we have now launched this as standalone APIs so that you can use Bedrock Guardrails outside of Amazon Bedrock service, apply it to any LLM and any model that you want, and there are checks for topic classification. So you could say, I don't want your my chatbot to be talking about investment advice or politics. So these are the so-called denied topics. And it's interesting because in this world, it's the LLMs that are judging other LLMs. So there's classification that happens for the topics, and it's quite effective. But more recently, we've also incorporated factual correctness or groundedness checks and relevance checks so that we can compare the context of what you pass to LLM with the response and see if there is some misalignment and hallucinations that are happening. So this is a very important thing, and I think more and more tooling is going to be launched, including by us in this space. But again, I want to tie it back to this traditional, detection of bias, because as much as we don't want these models and chatbots to offend us and be, don't include any stereotype language in there, at the end of the day, we care about the outcome of this interaction. And if you look at outcome-based assessments for fairness and bias, you could actually apply the same techniques as in the traditional machine learning. Did I get the refund that I wanted? Did I get my loan approved? And so on. So I think as an industry, we're going to come back to this idea soon.
Thanks, Dennis. There's a lot of really good technology stuff that you mentioned. I want to come back to a couple of these as well on the technology side. But I would like to hear from Lambert a little bit on how on the governance of things, like as you're working with institutions and governments and companies in the financial space. How do you see the governance of AI initiatives happening in a way that will enable responsible AI from the governance side, but also take advantage of some of the technological capabilities that Dennis just described to us?
Yeah, sure. Happy to talk about governance. I just wanted to mention one thing about bias because Dennis had so much interesting topics to comments on bias. I'm always super happy when an AI system displays bias. It really makes me happy because, to me, it is a mirror that it's holding up to society. It's trained on all kinds of data that we humans have created, and apparently there's lots of bias in there. And this is the first time we get confronted with our own bias. And hopefully, I might say that at some point, the people will look at that and not just say, oh, we have to improve our machine learning system. We have to put more guardrails or whatever and tweak the internal mechanics of the AI system. Hopefully, at some point, people will start saying, maybe we should fix society. And then the data that we generate wouldn't contain that bias. But anyway, that's a long-term hope. On the topic of governance, I think one of the things that is very difficult is to distinguish where the accountability is for these things like responsible AI, because in these, especially in these generative AI systems, there's 3 levels of actors involved. There's the people who make the foundation models, something like GPT from OpenAI or Claude or Gemini, these foundation models. And then there is the people who deploy these systems. And then there's the users. So if I give a concrete example of that, and we're not doing this at the moment, but imagine that we would create an AI application for our HR department so that all the hiring managers don't have to read through thousands of CVs anymore, but it can automatically done with AI. Then we use a foundation model that we get somewhere. We don't create it by ourselves, but then we use that in a certain way. with certain system prompts and to create that application that can give a judgment on a particular CV or candidate, or maybe a written test, right? And it can give a certain assessment of that. And then the people who are going to use that, the hiring managers, they can use that in different ways. They might just automate the whole thing and say, okay, let the AI system decide who we should hire. Or they might use it as an initial screening or as recommendations that they then review. There's different ways in which they can use it, and that's a decision that lies with the users. So we have the people who create the foundation models. They have a certain, they're accountable for certain responsible aspects of their foundation models, and then the deployers, my team in this case, it would be my team that builds an application out of that for the HR department, etc. We have our own accountabilities, and then some of the accountability lies with the users on how they're going to use that. So when you're designing governance, and I think the AI Act recognizes those three different actors, but you have to be very clear about where which accountabilities lie. And that makes it hard. The other thing about governance, of course, is that it's hard is that any type of policy making is always inherently slow because you need to get a lot of people on board. It's a slow process, and this field is moving so fast that you have two choices. Either you stay at a very, very high abstract level, and then your governance might be valid for a bit longer time, or you start becoming more concrete, which makes your governance more useful, but you might be out of date by the time all the documents get signed and stamped and it comes into effect. And the way we deal with that here at the UN is with a tiered system, where we have some governance at the highest level that remains quite abstract, and then a level below that creates policies that are much clearer. But those go through mechanisms that are much more nimble and easier. And then there is practical guidance that we can update monthly if we need to. So a tiered system of governance is a good solution, I think, in this case.
Thanks, Lambert. That what you're just describing mirrors a lot of the debate we had internally here at our company. I'm part of the AI Council of our parent company, ION, which owns Lab 49, along with many other well-known software firms in the Wall Street domain, if you wish. And we debated what kind of governance we wanted to do for our AI programs, including responsible AI concerns. And we had the debate, as we just mentioned, about how much of a how much loose we want to get versus how prescriptive we want to get. And I think we arrived at a decent compromise. I don't think we organized it in the way exactly as we described, and I think the lesson here is that these debates are particularly applicable to pretty much all companies, but especially so for financial services company. And governance needs to be thought of as an integral part of AI initiatives. Right now, I think because we're so much in the experimentation phase, and a lot of us technologists have run ahead of compliance, have run ahead of legal, have run ahead of policy in many ways, there doesn't always seem to be the emphasis that we would like to see on how we manage and work these initiatives so that we can then apply responsible AI and do all the other things that we need to do out there. So I think what you just mentioned, what we're talking about here, I think is highly applicable to them. I'd like to hear from Tirath now, because Tirath, you mentioned at the beginning you don't have you have a mistrust of government and big tech, and we're talking a lot here about both government and the big tech side. I'd like to hear an opposing on your end, or whatever you believe makes more sense given what we just discussed technologically and governance-wise.
Okay, there are two different threads that I'm going to follow here. The first one is that we are increasingly reliant on open source models. And when we are using a model for LLM or from for other AI from other companies that's open source. And we look at the taxonomy of the various taxonomy of AI, and we're using some of these models. If that model, if the rug gets pulled out from our under our feet, how do we cater for those things that have gone missing, and where does the responsibility for those algorithms lie? If everybody starts using GPT-4o or whatever comes next, and there are fundamental flaws in that model, does that responsibility lie with the company that's using it or with OpenAI? So I'm veering towards that OpenAI is the one that would have to fix it because everybody else is using it. So in some ways, it's making the thing a lot simpler for companies because they sort of say, well, the fault really lies with OpenAI. So I think that aspect about the taxonomy of AI, whatever model of taxonomical structure one wants to use, becomes really quite crucial. And I'm writing a chapter for a book on AI law and regulation, which is going to be out soon, and it really tackles that point. The aspect that I talked about, which is the community interest companies, and how do we enable, how do we engender trust in the public if we do not trust big tech or if we don't trust government? There I've just put out a paper in the Data for Policy community interest company, and there we make 5 statements, and these are of the ilk. AI algorithms compliance is inseparable from, if you like, digital from data and digital infrastructure. So we are talking about the end-to-end. AI assurance as a service is a system level end-to-end involving people, processes, and technologies. We cannot just concentrate on technologies and needs to do that in a comprehensive manner. Giving a poor tradesman excellent tools is not going to help. You need excellent tradesmen, and they can do a good job with even bad tools. So I think the thing about the education and the training of the entire company becomes really important. The third element that we talk about is the optimal approach to assessing AI systems, and these AI systems are really technology driven, and yet they need a human-centric methodology, balancing technical sophistication with human oversight. So just because something is really quite technically, some things are getting technically quite complicated, and most of the time people don't really understand what it's doing. So I think there needs to be some sort of bridge, and I think to a large extent it's becoming unbridgeable simply because of the exponential rise in complexity. The fourth aspect we talk about is that there's no such thing as being totally risk-free. There's a risk with everything. Yeah. So we need some sort of balance between the benefit and the risk. Somewhere we will have to sort of say, even if an AI system gets this thing, at this, even if an AI system represents this level of risk, it's inevitable that we have to adopt it. And then finally, the fifth statement we make in terms of how we can assure the public that that an AI system is good enough is by recognizing that AI assessment cannot be closed loop. It needs an open, ongoing evaluation and adaptation. Yeah, so that's really the framework in terms of where the community needs to come in. And I think the other aspect is we need to understand the taxonomy of AI, who did it, why they did it, who do we blame, and so on, and who's going to fix it.
Right. Thanks, Tirath. I like everything you said. I would love to read that paper. First of all, it sounds absolutely fascinating. But I want to stand on something very specific that you said, where you want excellent tradespeople. You think they can do wonders even if they don't have the perfect tools. But what if we actually had better tools and had the excellent tradespeople as well? I like what Dennis, for example, described about some of the capabilities around guardrails, and I've actually worked with that with that technology in Bedrock, and it is very promising. There are also third-party tools out there that help you implement, for example, the NIST AI risk management framework and things of that nature. So I think what I think what we're seeing is a little bit of a convergence between in Gen AI and compliance and risk management, which I think we're going to have to do a lot of us. So those of us who are technologists in this talk will have to keep our eyes out and help steer towards. To that effect, though, I also would like to throw a little bit more into the discussion, given the fact that, as already alluded by Dennis, the classic ML and Gen AIs, they may have similar underpinnings, but the way we interact with them is very different. And one of the things that has stunned me personally over the past year and a half, when Gen AI started really getting steam, is the fact that pretty much everyone now with English knowledge is a programmer. And I say that because I think that's what it is. We are instinctively programming these LLMs through the use of English language, which has never happened really before. So I would love to hear, let's start, Dennis. I would like to hear from you how you think that affects the way we design systems for responsible, both for capabilities and for adhering to responsible AI, and what is the difference between something like a general chatbot for general users versus an AI system geared towards the financial services, where we don't necessarily want to have that full freedom of the full English language there.
Yeah, very interesting phenomenon indeed. So I alluded to, for example, Bedrock guardrails with denied topics. And there you do describe what a denied topic should be in English. So if you want to say, I want the chatbot to avoid speaking about politics, well, you have to explain in a paragraph and maybe give some examples of what politics actually means, which is a broad topic. And so the accuracy of that classifier will depend on how well you manage to describe this topic. And of course, that's one simple example of this, but we're now getting into real programming in English or maybe some other natural languages. And there are various tools, for us, Amazon Q for Developer, for example, is one where you can specify descriptions of what a particular function may be doing, right? And that code is generated for me. So I saw a recent joke from a former colleague who was saying, well, I'm now, when I code, I spend my days as a kind of using reverse psychology with these LLMs to coax them into writing the code that I want them to write, not necessarily what they start with. So that's definitely an interesting phenomenon, and it's been quite a bit has been said in the past about this, that really we're becoming more and more sort of we need to be competent at communicating and being able to communicate the requirements, specify the requirements, because as you're setting the goals and objectives for these systems, if you make a mistake, the systems may find a different way of interpreting your communication, right, and getting or producing the incorrect, invalid output. I want to also sort of come back to the risk discussion a little bit, because I found it very interesting. Well, first of all, I think my colleagues here alluded to this idea of shared responsibility, and indeed for AWS, that has been there from the very beginning. As soon as we started putting some cloud services out there, even before AI specific, we had something called shared responsibility model, where the services that we offer need to be built according to certain standards. Certainly, like security has always been job one for us. But then, as people are composing their systems and applications out of these building blocks of individual services, obviously they also have the responsibility of doing the right thing. And this is not different with AI. If you build a product like a model that you've trained, one of these large models that are super popular, well, with this comes responsibility. And so you definitely need to make sure that you train and fine-tune these models and align them properly to what they're supposed to do. And then and it's funny, for me, who's been with Amazon for, like I said, 19 years, I remember the time when it still felt like a startup. Like I was working very hard. Remember with my one-year-old child on a Saturday with earphones and on a conference call trying to launch something. But it's true, we've grown substantially, and so like we've added a leadership principle called success and scale brings broad responsibility, and that's sort of going back to that idea that there is that recognition on our side. From that risk perspective, it is true, however, that the customers or companies, organizations who are building an AI system, they are in the best possible position to determine all the risks of it, because they're always looking at it from a specific use case point of view. And
they are, but if I can ask you a clarifying question on this, like they are definitely in that position, but don't you think that there also needs to be some sort of overarching policy framework to help guide them? Because in the risk management side, we have several regulations, from CCAR to Basel to anything else, right? And it's the overarching framework, and then you work off of that. Do you think that's the way it's going to go for responsible AI in the world?
In some ways, it's already proceeding in that way, right? The EU AI Act has been referred to, and they start with the risk kind of first approach, right, of prohibited applications, high-risk applications, and so on. So the NIST risk management framework is something that we're kind of incorporating, and we have dedicated teams internally who are also assessing our own technology, right, and working with the teams that are building the technology to make sure they're designed in the right way. And we've started to put out also tooling and best practices and some guidance on risk management, risk assessment for customers. So we had a blog post published for re:Invent on like high-level mapping of this. We've started offering workshops to some select customers on how to do this. This landscape is evolving. I work with Singapore AI Verify Foundation. Their approach is to actually offer open source tooling and have companies contribute to it, and then ultimately use this technology to do the checks and verifications necessary.
Thanks, Dennis. Appreciate it. Lambert, do you have any additional thoughts on the subject of technology?
Nothing at the moment. No, thanks.
Okay. All right. So then let's get into a final round, because we have 7 minutes before this this webinar is over. I'd like let's try to bring all of this together. We heard a lot of really good aspects. We could easily be here another 3 hours and talk about this, because it is such a vast subject, and perhaps we can organize a follow-up down the line. But what I would like to hear, starting from Tirath, like 2 minutes each if possible, is your overall thinking, like how would bring everything we discussed together, how would companies, especially in the financial services sector, but also outside, manage, govern, and implement Gen AI projects within a responsible AI frame?
I think that the big issue that's facing when it comes to generative AI is really how do you remove all the misinformation, how do you remove the hallucinations and so on. So, one can work on models where a number of large language models and other things end up contributing to the overall voting. So we can begin to mitigate some of those issues. But in terms of, if you like, the overarching framework that I work in, it really comes down to data, to the privacy issues. A system cannot give you bias if the data does not contain bias. Then all you have are issues around explainability and so on. So my main thrust has been, as I said at the beginning, around classification of data, about consistency of data, about the structure of data, about the conceptualization, the ontology of the data, the quality of the data, if you like, the epistemological issues, and then finally the ethical issues, the axiology. So those 6 vectors are what's driving me. when it comes to delivering things that are going to be beyond the current legislative frameworks. So we can actually build value systems that are going to be evolving. We can actually have the quality. We can have, if you like, the relationships and so on. So that's really the way we are doing things, and those are the things we're implementing at QXQ.ai.
Thank you, Tirath. Much appreciated. Lambert?
I missed what the question was. You
I'm
fell off for a
I'm just giving everyone 2 minutes to wrap up their thoughts on
Yeah.
how to implement responsible AI within the context of the discussion.
Yeah, I just repeating what I said at the beginning, that we're in the next 5 to 10 years, the field of AI is going to have such a huge impact on the way we work, the way we interact, the way we communicate, the way we do business, on society as a whole. So I think it's really, really important that we get this right. And I think everybody is sort of aware that there are risks to AI and that we have to do something about it. And that's the reason we are having our webinar today. So those are all good things. But I think we're not there yet, and we have to get our act together as individuals and as companies, and as society as a whole.
Fantastic. Thank you, Lambert. And a closing statement from you, Dennis, please.
Yeah, thanks, Yanis. Well, thanks everyone for attending, and to my colleagues here as well. Personally, I'm excited as a technologist at heart, right? Every time we hear of problems and we recognize these problems, we're all excited about solving them, right? And so part of this is technology and science. For example, explainability, we haven't talked a lot about this, but that's actually a difficult area with these large language models. And I've contributed to the ISO standard on explainability myself. We spend an enormous amount of time even discussing like what is the difference between interpretability and explainability. The science will catch up. There will be practical tooling that will emerge out there. And same thing for hallucinations, right? That's recognized as one of the biggest issues out there in terms of practical applications. And like I mentioned, some tooling that we've launched with Bedrock guardrails, but we're going to continue working on this and solving this technology. So there are good reasons to be excited. But I think the number 2 thing is education, right? If your organization is building and putting these, deploying these applications, you need to have the right people trained, hired. So for example, we have a machine learning university course out there on YouTube for free on responsible AI. So I'd encourage people to take it and learn more about it. But I think overall, the industry is treating these seriously, and then we're working to solve them.
Great, thank you. And on my end, on behalf of Lab 49, as you can see, we are absolutely invested in both Gen AI and within a responsible AI framework. We are partners with AWS, so we are very deep into their technology on Gen AI, and especially both on the Bedrock side, SageMaker side we mentioned, as well, of course, as the responsible AI questions we discussed. However, we are also an independent company, although we're incredibly happy AWS here, and they're a fantastic partner for us. We also are very specialized in financial services. So if anything of what you heard today resonates with you, please reach out to us. We will work with you. You will bring in AWS as needed to basically talk about your responsible AI framework and your technology needs. Because we're an end-to-end consultancy, we do both technology work, product management work with UX work, and you do the risk management and basically high-level policy development and operating model work. We can bring all of that stuff together in the context of Gen AI, and as you can see from the people we have here in the panel, we'll continue to ask for advice. We are a really good technologists, but we're much more than just technologists. On that end, I want to thank everyone on the panel. Thank you, Lambert. Thank you, Tirath. Thank you, Dennis, very, very much for this. And I want to thank you in the audience for for attending, and I hope you all found this useful. We will make this available later as well as a recording for you if you're interested in seeing this or sharing with someone. And on that end, thank you so very much, and have a great day, everyone.